I like how you had to put out there that you knew that was a joke. I knew that you knew it was a joke. I was letting the listeners know in case they thought we sold out and had a sponsor. But of course, it wouldn't be Hulu.
Welcome, nerds, to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
Pretty well, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm getting a little better each day. I had to bring up the wisdom teeth. I had to.
Yeah,
I felt obligated to.
I knew you would.
Oh, yeah. I'm being a super bitch about it. But yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better. It's still pretty tender, but I'm definitely getting there. I'm starting to eat solid foods again, so that's exciting. I never thought I would ever say those words, but yeah, it's been
you're talking about it like it was this big traumatic thing.
It was
something that most adults go through.
I literally almost had to go to the hospital. Like, it was that bad.
Really?
Yeah,
because serious?
Yes, I'm being very serious. Friday afterwards, it's kept bleeding so much that I was swallowing so much blood that I was actually getting sick, and I almost had to go to the emergency room. So it was pretty awful. I mean, I'm a total baby about stuff like this, so I completely understand like your hesitation to believe me. But no, it was actually really, really bad. I mean, even judging by my bitch standards, it was really, really bad. So yeah.
Are you sure that the person that operated on you had done it before?
I don't know. He didn't seem like he did. He literally was telling my wife how bad it was, like how hard it was to get all my teeth to come out after the surgery. Like, even if that was the case, why would you tell someone that?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was bad.
I don't know. I don't think that's normal, man. I didn't swallow any blood.
He was a total weirdo. Like, from the consultation on until the surgery, he was a weird dude. Like, I don't think that he had very good people skills. He was very awkward every time I had to talk to him.
Do you think that he kept your teeth and made a necklace out of them?
Yes, I think he did. That is for sure a thing that he did. It's for sure on the table because he was a weird dude. I will tell you that, and Tyler, you know this because you've talked to me for years now. Anytime that anyone ever asks me, how's it going? If they phrase it like that, my response every single time, it's just instinct now, is for me to say it's going. It's just Correct. What I say. So the doctor comes in right before the surgery and he goes, how's it going? And I instinctively said, it's going. It's not something, I'm not making a joke. It's just what I say. And he thought that was the funniest goddamn thing he had ever heard. I swear to God. At one point, he's literally on the other side of the room and I could hear him say it. He said, it's going, and then chuckled again. He really thought it was that funny. He's such a weird dude.
Oh my God, man. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that some guy off the street came in and put on a white coat and then dug around in your mouth for a while.
Yeah, it felt like it. That's exactly how it feels like.
Yeah, man, that's fucked up.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. All right, so if this is your first episode, we just kind of start off each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
I started watching the show Runaways, which is a new Marvel show on Hulu that is based on the comic by Brian A. Vaughan, or I mean, at least he did the original run of the comic. The comic is basically about 6 teenagers that find out their parents are supervillains, and it follows how they cope with that. So I think that is a pretty fantastic concept for a comic, and I didn't know that this comic existed. And whenever I heard they were making it into a show, I immediately wanted to seek the comic out because I thought it was such a cool premise. I haven't done that yet, but I'm still very intrigued by it. But needless to say, I was also intrigued by the idea of the show because I think that it's, again, just an amazing concept. However, the magic that I imagine is present in the comics is nowhere to be found in this show. So the show takes what I think, again, is a really cool concept and somehow makes it boring and almost a chore to watch. There's nothing Marvel about this show. So for those unaware, this isn't like Legion or Gifted or anything like this. Like, this is supposed to tie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the same vein as the Netflix shows, but it doesn't tie to anything, at least in these first 3 episodes I've watched. So don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think that it's necessary for anything that Marvel puts out for it to tie to everything else. But this show feels completely out of place when you look at it at the other things that it's supposed to share a universe with. Everything else that's Marvel, it just doesn't feel the same. It's almost like a cardboard cutout of a show. It lacks depth and it lacks suspense. And 3 episodes in, I'm not sympathizing with any of the characters. It's probably because the show follows 6 teenagers like the comic does, but it also follows all of their parents. So, do the math, 2 parents per teenager. That's a lot going on, and it's almost too hard to keep track of. It was very hard for me to get invested, and, maybe that would come with time if I stick with this show. But, we talk about it all the time on this podcast. We're both busy guys, and we have a lot going on, and I don't necessarily have time to stick with the show in the hopes that it gets better. I do want to say a few things positive about it. I think that this show does the teenage aspect really well. Like, the 6 main characters feel like real teenagers and they have real teenage problems. And it just really captures the essence of being in high school and navigating normal teenage things while also having the menace of the villainous parents lurking in the background. And I will say that I am slightly intrigued to learn more about what is actually going on with the parents in this show, since there are still a lot of mysteries around what exactly they're doing that's so terrible after only 3 episodes. But again, I don't feel like I have enough time to keep watching this on hopes. Like, we've talked about it tons of times before with our comics we read, like that first issue, or in this case, the first episode of a show, you really want it to grab you and make you invested in what's going to happen in future episodes. And this show just didn't do it for me. I think that the best comparison that I could make is that it reminds me of The Walking Dead. Like, sure, there are good episodes and there are good things, but overall, it's boring and it's a chore and it's something that I'm just not interested in, which is a huge bummer because I think it's an amazing concept, and hopefully they find their footing as the season goes on and it gets a lot better. But right now it's not that great. So far there are 5 episodes out of what I believe is going to be a 10 episode season. Hulu's not like Marvel; it doesn't release everything all at once, so it's releasing episodes every Tuesday. But with all of that being said, I doubt that I'm going to keep up from here.
Yeah, I was intrigued by this show. Initially, I like you, am definitely intrigued by the concept. I talked about they just recently restarted a comic that this show's based on when Runaways #1, I think it was a few months ago. I talked about the first issue, and I wasn't that impressed with it. So I really didn't keep up with it after that first issue, and this was a show I was kind of going back and forth about watching. I will probably just go ahead and skip it. It's weird, though, because we've said this before on the podcast, like, we don't necessarily talk to each other about what we're going to talk about in the episode. So the fact that I'm also talking about a Hulu show, that was not planned at all. So I'm just going to jump right into what I'm into. Like I said, it's a Hulu exclusive show produced by Seth Rogen called Future Man. It follows Josh, a janitor for a herpes research clinic, played by Josh Hutcherson from Hunger Games, who is obsessed with a seemingly unbeatable video game titled Bionic Wars. It turns out that game is actually a futuristic training simulator that was created by a group called the Resistance to help/train the Savior. And if that concept sounds familiar, I think it's supposed to. They pull a lot from early sci-fi. There's a lot of Terminator in there. There's a lot of Back to the Future references. There's some other stuff that I've never seen before. So they do make mention very frequently other kind of early sci-fi. It's a very meta show. It has a lot of meta humor in it. It embraces its influences and kind of pokes fun of itself because of those influences. And I honestly was surprised at how much I liked it. I'm not a fan of the time travel genre. If you're new to the podcast, I'll just be real brief with why I don't like it, because longtime listeners have probably heard me say this a million times. I just don't really like time travel because I think a lot of shows and a lot of movies spend way too much time explaining the time travel. I mean, it's not possible, so let's not try to over explain it. Just get to it and get to the story. Like get over it, explain it real quick, and then get to the story. I don't want super, super complex time travel. In this time travel in this particular show, I wouldn't necessarily classify it as simple, but I do think that they do a really good job with kind of tackling some of the issues with the genre. I think they do that very well. So not necessarily exactly what I want from time travel show, because it's not necessarily that simple, but I do think that they do a good job of tackling some of those challenges. It's not always necessarily what you would describe as highbrow comedy. I do think that they do a really good job of mixing the smart jokes with some silliness. The show definitely does not take itself too seriously. There's literally a scene in an episode where one character accidentally comes on another, and then they have later in that episode they have a really smart Back to the Future reference. So I think they blend those two things really well. So I definitely think that if you're a fan of sci-fi and you're a fan of time travel genre, you will get a kick out of this show because it's really, really good.
Yeah, I'll have to check this out. It was on my radar because I've heard Seth Rogen doing some promotional stuff for it. So something that I'll definitely have to check out because it sounds pretty cool. And I don't dislike time travel like you do. So I think that it's something that I'd be pretty invested in. Yeah. Before we go to comics, do you want to throw to an advertisement from our new sponsor, Hulu?
Sure.
No, that's a joke. Of course.
I know.
I like how you had to put out there that you knew that was a joke. I knew that you knew it was a joke. I was letting the listeners know in case they thought we sold out and had a sponsor. But of course, it wouldn't be Hulu. Anyways, I read Venom Inc. Alpha 1 this week, which is a one-shot that kicks off a Venom crossover event in the Spider-Man universe of comics. So they had tried a type of Venomverse crossover earlier this year, and I talked about issue 1 of that. But if you recall, I mentioned that it felt boring and like a retread to me. And then it also introduced yet another host to the Venom symbiote. So it wasn't really for me, but I thought that I would give this new one a try because it's bringing Spider-Man into the Venom storyline. So call me old-fashioned, but you know, with my Venom, I want it to be the tortured Eddie Brock version every time. This one-shot brings Eddie Brock back into the fold, and I think he may have been back in the fold in the Venom storyline, but I gave up on it before he came back. But this brings him back full circle, and it's a collaboration between Dan Scott, who that's his name, or no, Dan Slott, right?
The guy that writes Spider-Man. Yeah.
So he's the writer on Amazing Spider-Man, and then also Mike Costa, who has been doing this new Venom run, and it's definitely a good idea that they kind of did this one together because I think that it marries the two ongoing storylines pretty well. There's been a lot of focus on Venom this year, and for me, like I mentioned a few times, the one thing that's been missing in all of that focus has been Spider-Man. So I'm going to digress here, but that's why I think I'm so indifferent to this Venom movie that's coming out next year and that's being filmed right now with Tom Hardy. I think I've said it before on the podcast, but you know, Venom is my favorite Spider-Man villain, but that's only because Spidey is involved. So you can keep your anti-hero, just give me the villainous Venom. And anyways, I think that that's why this Venom run has been so vanilla to me because there's no Spider-Man. So this crossover, like I mentioned, promises to reconcile that, and it focuses more on Spider-Man facing the return of Venom head on. So in addition to Spider-Man coming into the fold, there's also a struggle with the symbiote between Flash Thompson and Eddie Brock. So Eddie Brock, of course, is the Venom we all know and love, and then Flash Thompson, in case you don't know, donned the Venom suit as Agent Venom. He went into space with it, and he was part of the Guardians of the Galaxy at one point, so he has a history with the suit as well. And then they're starting to develop a lingering threat in the background that I'm sure is going to end up being the big bad of this crossover. Overall, I think that this book delivers a really good story, and it takes two of the most prolific characters to don the symbiote and have them fighting over it with Spider-Man in the middle, which I think is a good decision. I think the art's great as well, and the character of Venom has to be so fun to draw. There's like a splash page where the symbiote is basically stretched between two people, which was a really awesome drawing. And so I don't know the name of the artist on this book, but he's got to love what he's doing, and he's doing a really good job at it, or she. Yeah, overall, I think this is going to be a really cool run. It's one of those annoying crossovers that starts with this book, and then it goes to Amazing Spider-Man, and then it goes to the Venom book, and then it goes back to Amazing Spider-Man. So it's going to jump around a lot. But I think that I'm going to try to keep up with that because it's really getting back to the roots with the character, which I'm crazy about.
I can't really stand when they do the Venom storyline without Eddie Brock. Like, it's just, for me, it goes through the same paces. The character will get the symbiote, and they go through the same things that Eddie Brock went through and Spider-Man went through when they first got the suit. And it's just, I don't know. It just seems like we see that same thing over and over again. I mentioned, I can't remember what issue it was, but they did something similar with Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows. Mary Jane actually got the symbiote, and I thought that was pretty stale when they did that, because again, she kind of went through the same paces as Eddie Brock did and Spider-Man did when he first got it. So it just seems really stale when they do that. And I wasn't a huge fan of Agent Venom. Even when he was with the Guardians of the Galaxy, that felt really weird.
Yeah. I mean, I never read any of the Agent Venom stuff. I think that it looks like a cool concept, and that might be the concept they're going with this Venom movie. But yeah, for me, it's always just going to come back to the original baddie. So what'd you read this week?
All right. So I read Batman TMNT 2, number 1. So Tyler and I both discussed the first series when it was released a while back. I think I liked it a good deal more than Tyler did, but I will agree that it does get batshit crazy, pun intended, towards the end. The same creative team behind that first series is back for the second installment, and we've talked about this before in some of our movie reviews. The good thing about sequels is the fact that you don't have to spend too much time setting things up. And apparently this creative team didn't get the memo because this first issue is pretty much all set up, which is weird because it picks up right where the first one left off. Well, a little bit after the first one left off, but it definitely isn't its own story. It definitely follows the events of the first series. So I'm not quite sure why they felt the need to have all of this set up. Basically, you don't get the crossover of this crossover event until the last page. So that was very disappointing. Pretty much the entire issue was all setting up them actually crossing over again. So you would have thought that they would have gotten that out of the way the first series, but they didn't. I will say that despite that, I did like the more narrow approach to the storytelling in this first issue versus the first series. The first series gets really chaotic towards the end, and there's a lot of different Batman villains, and they're all over the place, and it is really, really kind of chaotic, that first series. And I like that this, at least the first issue of the second installment, is much more focused. I also like that Donnie, my favorite turtle, is basically the focal point of this story. He is a little bit of a bitch at the beginning, and I wasn't crazy about that aspect of it, but I'm really excited to kind of see where his story line goes from this issue. The artwork is really great. I love the artwork in the first series, and it just kind of picks up where that left off. So really gritty and great. I love it quite a lot. The characters work really well off of each other. They definitely did in the first series. You don't get to see a whole lot of that in this particular issue, but I'm definitely looking forward to the future issues because I think they're off to a good start, even though, again, I wish they didn't spend so much time in this first issue setting everything up.
I liked the first run enough, I guess. It definitely could have been a bigger train wreck than what they ended up putting out, which was by no means a train wreck, but it definitely lost me in a couple issues. That being said, I chose not to pick up this the first issue in this new run, so I will not be reading it. I'm glad that it focuses on Donnie, because I think that might be one of the turtles that gets the least amount of love, and I know that he's your favorite, but yeah, I don't think that it's going to be for me.
Yeah, and one thing that I failed to mention was I actually really like this book, and I'm not sure, they don't pull a ton from Batman, like what's actually happening in Batman right now, but they are pulling a lot of stuff, just things here and there from the TMNT universe, the TMNT comic that's going on right now. So I do like that. I doubt that this is considered canon by any means, but I do like the fact that they are pulling stuff from the main TMNT book.
Yeah, I mean, that is cool.
All right, so that's all I had for comics. What do you have for nerd news this week?
I have a few stories here. So the first one is that Bryan Singer was fired from the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, which is the biopic of Freddie Mercury, which was kind of crazy. I didn't realize that he's kind of dramatic on set, apparently. The first story that came out said that he basically left before Thanksgiving break and then never came back and went MIA. And then as things started to come out, it was revealed that he was fired from the movie for his erratic behavior on set and some debauchery, I guess, coming to work hungover, that type of stuff. But apparently it was an issue on X-Men Apocalypse as well. He went missing for part of that shoot, which is crazy to me. But a couple days after he was fired, somebody came forward and said that they had been sexually harassed by him at some point. I think maybe 2003. So I don't know if this is all the dominoes falling or what, but long story short, he got shit canned from this movie, which I'm not a big Bryan Singer fan. I think he's a piece of shit. No love lost for me. I want this movie to be great because I think Queen is an amazing band and Freddie Mercury was an amazing talent and they deserve a great movie. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the mix of two directors.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if that's going to affect the film at all. Hopefully it affects it for the better to kind of get him out of there. That's kind of my initial thought, was that maybe he saw the writing on the wall with the new accusation or what. I kind of assumed that there was going to be more to the story when we first heard that he was fired or went missing or whatever the story is. I kind of figured that there was more to it, and we're hearing more and more, especially considering the past accusations we heard. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, about him. We kind of assume the worst with people like that. So yeah, I kind of figured we were going to hear more stories about his accusations, and he just sounds like a piece of shit, and I hope that he just goes away.
Yeah, absolutely, man. He definitely does sound like a piece of shit. So next story is that it had kind of been kicked around for a month now, and I never really brought it up in Nerd News because I thought it was pretty far-fetched and it would never happen. But apparently Quentin Tarantino is pretty serious about making a Star Trek movie. And not only that, but it was revealed that it will be rated R, which, I mean, every single movie Quentin Tarantino's done has been rated R, but kind of a sentence that I never thought I'd ever say was that he was making an R-rated Star Trek movie.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it's going to be rated R, because I think if you can get Quentin Tarantino interested in a project like Star Trek, the studio's going to let him do whatever the hell he wants. And just the way that he writes movies, I just don't think he can write a PG-13 movie. But, yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. I mean, I'm not a huge Trekkie by any means, but he said on the record several times that he only wants to do so many movies, and I don't know if he's going to count this one because he's not technically writing it. I think somebody else is writing the script. He'll probably get story credit for sure, and then I guess right now he's going to be directing it. I really highly doubt if he ends up directing this or not. I would assume that he'd probably end up being a producer on it, but it just seems like, I don't know. He's working on his Charlie Manson movie, and it just, I would be really surprised if this actually gets made.
Has he ever directed anything he didn't write?
Not that I can think of. He wrote True Romance, right?
He wrote True Romance, but didn't direct it.
Yeah, and he wrote Dusk Till Dawn, right? But he didn't he didn't direct that either, because Robert Rodriguez directed that.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think he has.
Yeah, I think he's written everything he's ever directed. So all of this just sounds weird and unlike him. So yeah, I'm kind of on your side with that. Like, I don't think that this will be made by him. Maybe it'll come to fruition, but I don't see it happening, especially because he already had another movie in the works, and he's not somebody who juggles projects. He pretty much stays on one through completion and then moves on from there. So I thought that what you posted on our Facebook was pretty accurate. Like, Paramount was going to give him whatever he wants.
Yeah, pretty much.
A movie like this. So, you know, whether it's rated R or NC-17 or whatever, like, they're going to make it happen for him because they want it so bad, as opposed to him wanting it. So,
for sure.
All right. So, did you watch the Jurassic World 2 trailer?
Unfortunately, I did.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, huh? More of the same, I guess.
It looks so stupid. It looks just unbelievably stupid. Like, did they not learn anything from the Jurassic Park sequels? Like, it just looks unbelievably stupid.
Yeah, I'm going to be pretty pissed off. Like, for me, like, the one selling point is that Jeff Goldblum's going to be in it. And they just put him right out there on Front Street in this trailer, and he's in a courtroom setting, and it's kind of narrated by him while he's giving a deposition. But if that's all he does, like, I by no means have any, I don't know for sure that that's all he's going to do in this film, but if that's all that they brought him in to do was to kind of be a voice in a courtroom, like, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. Like, I want him out there in the middle of all these dinosaurs, and in this trailer we didn't see that. Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was it. Because I don't see how you realistically get that character on that island.
Yeah, I cringed pretty hard when he said life finds a way.
Oh yeah, that was really, really cheesy. The worst part for me is when you see the dinosaur and it's got like the devil horns. That was the dumbest thing ever. I hated that so much.
Why? It's a real dinosaur.
I don't care. That looks real stupid. That looks so stupid. Don't put that in there. Dinosaur or not, don't put that in there.
So, I mean, in Jurassic World, they've basically, you know, the T-Rex is a character at this point. Like, it's been in almost each of the movies, and they brought it back for Jurassic World. But in this movie, like, that was the big reveal of the trailer. It was like, oh, the T-Rex is here again. And I can't buy into it anymore, man.
You're not going to make a Jurassic Park or Jurassic World movie without the T-Rex. I don't think there's been one without it. Like, it's the big showstopper, so there's no way that they wouldn't put that in there. Like, if you watched one of those movies and it wasn't in there, there'd be fucking riots in the street. So don't pretend like you weren't going to put it in there.
All right, the last story I have is another trailer that just released today. We're recording on Saturday. It was a teaser for the Spider-Man animated movie that's coming out next December. It's called Spider-Man Spider-Verse, and it was written by Chris Lord Phil. I always get these guys mixed up.
I just call
Chris
Lord Miller
and Phil Lord. Chris Lord and Phil Miller. Nope, Phil Miller is the character on Last Man Standing, or Last Man on Earth.
This is really embarrassing for you.
Yeah, Miller and Lord. They wrote it. is the gist of what I was saying. So, did you watch it by any chance?
No, I haven't got a chance. I had to work this morning and I just haven't watched it yet. So I definitely looking forward to it. I know that doesn't make for good conversation on the podcast, but yeah, I haven't gotten around to it yet.
So I'm glad that I could bring this story up and just use it as a tool to embarrass myself trying to get those guys' names right. But it's not bad. It's a cool animation style. I don't know about a feature-length movie in the animation style they use, but I trust that it's in good hands. It definitely teases that there are going to be a lot of different Spider-Men and Spider-Women in it. So I'm curious how this story is going to play out, but we're a year away from this movie being released, so I'm sure we'll learn more as we get closer.
For sure.
All right, man. That's all I got for Nerd News.
All right. So our next segment is just kind of plainly called our main topic. It changes from episode to episode. We actually got a chance to watch Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle early as part of the Amazon Prime early screening. And so we're actually going to go ahead and review it for this episode. Of course, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle is a sequel to the 95 classic film. It was directed by Jake Kasdan, who did... he's done a lot of TV, but he also did those really shitty Bad Teacher and Sex Tape movies. It focuses on a Breakfast Club-esque group of detention students who stumble upon a video game that, when played, sucks them into the game. That group must then learn to work together to beat the game to escape. Much like most kids growing up in the 90s, I've seen the original film several times. I think I've seen it at least 30 times. Apparently I blocked out the ending because Tyler gave me shit a while back. I don't remember how it came up, but apparently I forgot that they get to go back as kids at the end of that movie. I don't know why, but I completely blocked out that ending. I actually watched it again for the first time in probably at least 10 years, the other day, because they, just recently released a steelbook of it at Best Buy. So I bought that and my wife and I watched it the other day, and still really a fun movie. Really, really fun movie. Doesn't age very well because the CGI is really horrible. Even judging by 90s standards, it's really, really bad. It's way too CGI dependent and it's really bad CGI. So, but still a really fun movie. The ending still is weird to me. I get why I blocked it out because I don't like that Christmas party scene at all. It's really, really dumb. But, I was really looking forward to seeing what they were going to do with the sequel. Tyler and I have kind of scoffed at the idea of the sequel, but the more we got closer to this movie, the more I kind of got excited for it.
Yeah, I don't know that I was ever excited for it. I thought that the trailers were pretty lame, and every time I saw it, people would laugh hysterically at it, and that pissed me off because I'm a grumpy old man, and I want everybody to hate the things that I hate. And I think that it all just came back to me being nostalgic for that first movie, and it being such a success, I think, in part to Robin Williams, and obviously he's not with us anymore, so everything about this movie being made and coming out kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, and obviously, I was going to see it. Of course, I'm not going to not see a blockbuster movie like this, especially this time of year. But it was just something that I wasn't that excited for.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, it was definitely something that certain movies you think aren't ever going to get a sequel. And this would be probably one of the ones that I had on top of my list of movies I never thought I was going to see a sequel for, and didn't necessarily need a sequel. So I get where you're coming from, and I felt exactly the same, but the closer we got to it, the more excited I felt, which was weird because I really didn't even think I was ever going to see this movie when we first started talking about it. I really hated the first promo material that we saw for it, but the closer we got, the more excited I got for it.
Cool. So you ready to jump in?
What'd you think of Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle?
So, broad strokes wise, overall, this movie is a lot better than it has any right to be. Don't get me wrong, it is not fantastic, but I will say that I had a lot more fun and it was a lot more enjoyable than I thought that I was going to have. Does it do anything different or groundbreaking? No, of course not. But there's a type of pureness to this movie that is refreshing, that reminds me of the original film from 1995, 1996. And even though this movie in particular doesn't always click, it was a pretty fun movie-going experience, which is, you know, the main reason we go to the movies anyway. So I definitely came away surprised that I kind of liked the movie.
Yeah, I actually thought that we were going to get into more of an argument. And I don't know why. We've been doing this podcast for 4 years. Usually we come down pretty similar on most of the movies that we review. But honestly, I mean, I fell in love with the original, not because it's a perfect film, because it isn't. Like I said, it doesn't really age that well, and it definitely has some story problems here and there. But I fell in love with the original because it's fun and it's original. And I love it to this day for nostalgic reasons. It's still fun and it's still original. And even though Welcome to the Jungle, story-wise, serves as a sequel, it's more of a remake than anything. It didn't feel like the filmmakers seemed too concerned with making a pure sequel to satisfy fans of the original film. If they were trying to do that, they failed. They seemed more concerned with trying to kind of recapture the magic of the first film. There's an entire generation of kids who will see this film not having ever seen the first Jumanji. And I think that the filmmakers really tried to make a film that captured the hearts of that generation. And I think they did a phenomenal job at that. I think that it's a really fun film. Maybe not as original as the first one is, but I mean, obviously sequels rarely are as original as the first. That's why they're sequels. But I think that this film really captures the tone of the original, and I was surprised at how much I liked it.
Wow, I didn't expect that for some reason.
Yeah, I actually thought you would be more bitter because you seem to be more attached to this film. Even though I do love the original, it seemed like you were more attached than I was. I mean, at least, the very least, you remembered the ending.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, so
the big plot points.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of plot, do you want to move right into the story?
Yeah, man. So for me, there was something really genuine and innocent about the story in this movie, which was, I think, just a breath of fresh air for the current climate that we're in, whether it's political or, you know, the state of Hollywood, whatever. Like, this movie just felt like a lot of fun, which I think was something that has been missing a little bit. I love the video game aspect of this story. I thought that was really clever, and I almost wanted to say something along the lines of, this is the best video game movie that's ever been made. But of course, it's not a video game movie. It just kind of plays on the tropes of video games, but it works really well. And I think that they did a really good job with that and integrating that into the story. Obviously, it's not a completely original concept since it is a sequel, but I appreciate that they were innovative in the fact that they went this route with the kids getting sucked into the game as opposed to completely retreading the first film. As I mentioned, and as you mentioned, I was very, very hesitant when plot details came out around this time last year about the movie. And I'm sure if you went back to one of those episodes and listened to the Nerd News where we talked about it, I was pretty harsh about the idea of these kids, I guess the four main actors being kids stuck in these bodies. But they pulled it off. So each of them has their qualities that are humorous, but like the biggest one is the hot girl goes into Jack Black's body, and you've seen it in the trailers. And typically sex changes in body swap movies are cliche and cringeworthy, but Jack Black is able to elevate it and make it genuinely funny. And so the biggest thing that I was worried about really just being turned off by in this movie actually turned out to be one of the better parts of the story and one of the funnier parts of the story. The one thing I will say that kind of took away from the first one for me is that in the first movie, and I mean, you just recently watched it, so correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't seen it in a couple years, but for me, watching it as a kid, there was this mysticism with the jungle that Alan Parrish got sucked into for however long, 20 years, whatever it was. And as a kid, I always imagined what that jungle looked like and what it was like for that character in the jungle. And for me, this movie kind of ruined it. It's basically, it's paradise. They filmed this in Hawaii, and you can tell that they filmed this in Hawaii. And for me, it was like when you are reading a book and you're imagining what everything in the book looks like, and then you see the movie and it's completely different from what you were imagining when you read it. That's what this movie does to the first movie for me. So that kind of turned me off a little bit. I don't think that that's any fault of the movie per se, but it was just something that left me a little unsettled with it. But overall, I thought that they really pulled off the story in general quite well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. I kind of scoffed at the idea of the game itself, Jumanji, the game, becoming a video game. It seems like a placeholder idea. It's like one of those types of ideas, like they just needed something to get the story going, and they figured they were going to think of something better and more creative later, and they just never did. And I kind of still feel that way about the concept, but I feel like I need to give credit where credit is due. Even though I don't think that that was a very original idea, I think that they executed that idea as well as you could possibly execute it. As gamers, we understand that there's several tropes that a lot of these games fall into. I mean, basically, if you go on the gaming subreddit, there's just memes poking fun at all of these different tropes, and I think that this movie did a really good job of kind of embracing those tropes, and the video game aspect of this movie wasn't used as just an excuse to have these like Freaky Friday type of gags. There was a lot of thought put into that, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much thought was put into all of video game stuff. And I completely agree with you when you said that it's like the best video game movie that we've seen, because it really, really is. Like, it captures the essence of playing video games really well, and it seems like it was made by gamers. So I really, really appreciate that, because I did not expect to be blown away by that. That being said, the story took a little too long to get to the jungle. I understood that they were trying to build some character development at the beginning with these kids, but I was getting a little bored towards the beginning. So I kind of wish, because of the promo material, we knew that they were going to get sucked into the game. We knew what was going to happen. Just get us there. Like, I don't think that they needed to spend as much time as they did at the very beginning getting us there. I was a little bit bored, and I was like, oh no, like this game or this movie is turning into exactly what I didn't want it to be. But as soon as they get to the jungle, it's fantastic. You didn't mention the villain at all. I mean, the real villain in this movie and in the original movie is the game itself, but kind of the side villain in this movie is really just kind of a plot device. It's played by Bobby Caravan or whatever his name is.
Caravan?
I don't remember his name, but it's pretty spot on to Caravan. I think I nailed it.
Cannavale?
I was pretty close.
Caravan is a type of minivan. It's a Dodge
I know
Caravan.
it's a joke. I was kidding.
I honestly didn't think you were, because you fucked up some names pretty bad before.
His character was so fucking stupid. Like, you know villains are bad and lame in a movie where you could literally only change, like, a couple of things, and that person doesn't even need to be in the movie anymore. And literally, you could take a couple of minor tweaks to the plot, and that character doesn't even need to be in the movie anymore. And the only real power that he is given in this movie is really weird, not executed basically at all. And I don't understand. The biggest problem I had with the plot was I don't understand. Like, he's given this power because he touches the jewel. Pretty much everybody in this movie touches the jewel. Why isn't that power transferable? Like, they never really explain that. And I mean, it's not important because his character's not important, but anytime he was on screen, I was like, why does he still have this power if he doesn't have the jewel? So it was very confusing to me, and it was really silly and stupid. So, I mean, that was definitely a check in the negative column, but for the most part, I really enjoyed this movie. I did want to kind of talk about the ending a little bit. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil anything. I think this ending actually works better Like I said at the beginning, I didn't really like the Christmas party ending to Jumanji. I thought that was really weird and unnecessary at the end of that movie. And so I actually think that this ending works a little bit better. I will say that this is just a small nitpick. I did think it was kind of silly that Colin Hanks just sees 4 teenagers walking down the street and he immediately assumes it's the 4 that he hung out with, but that is beside the point. It's just a small nitpick, but I really think that the ending of this film works a lot better than the original.
Yeah, I have issues with the ending as well, and I think that it's not time travel, but there's kind of like that element to it, and that irked me a little bit, and I won't get into details because it'll spoil too much, but I definitely agree with you that there are some holes in that ending, but overall, like, it works pretty well, and there's some sentiment to it, which is nice. I will touch on the villain really quick before we move on to performances, just because you brought it up, and agree with you that completely unnecessary. Like, what's so great about that first movie is that the villain is definitely the game, and the animals are kind of villainous, I guess, a little bit. I mean, you have that one human character, the hunter, that comes out, and I think that this movie relied too much on the human element and not enough on the animal element, which was a big part of that first one. So I could have done with less people, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. There is a ton of people in this version or this sequel that there's not a ton of animals. That thought never even occurred to me. I mean, there is a stampede kind of halfway through the movie that is pretty cool, but for the most part, they're running away from a gang of people.
Well, do you remember too? So in like the first movie, Alan Parrish, when he comes back from the game, he's like wearing leaves and he's got this crazy beard and he's basically like a crazy jungle man. But whenever you actually get to the jungle and you see the characters that are living there, none of them look like that. And they're all dressed fine and they're all dressed nicely and it's kind of modern. And I guess you could chalk it up to, oh, the game evolved and this is what the game is now. But there's a callback to the Alan Parrish character and it just doesn't line up with the jungle that we're told about in that first movie. And I think that's like the lingering thing that bothers me.
See, I never got that because the game does evolve. There doesn't need to be that bazaar with Alan because that's the video game. Like, it wasn't a video game back then. He was just in the jungle within the game, I guess. And so my thought behind that is, and I agree with you. I do think that tie to the first movie is a little cheesy, but not in the same way that you do. I just thought it was kind of flimsy way to tie it to the first movie. But I think of it in the way that the jungle was there, and then when it needed to be a video game, that's when the bazaar and that's when the people started showing up, because the people are just aspects or just characters in the video game. Well, they weren't there before because it wasn't a video game before.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like, I'm nitpicking at this point, and I'm going very in-depth on a very, a movie that lacks depth. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, and I think that the callback to Alan Parrish was more so like a callback to Robin Williams and just kind of paying their respects. So I'm definitely reading pretty deep into something that was, I think, just more to be there to be a tribute. So, but still, just kind of bothered me a little bit.
For sure. So our next segment in our reviews is performances. So how'd you feel about the performances in this movie?
I thought that the performances were pretty well. I think that the 4 main actors, so The Rock, Kevin Hart, Jack Black, and Karen Gillan, or however you pronounce her last name, I thought that they were all pretty great. I think that they captured the idea of kids being stuck in their bodies fairly well. I don't think that it was a stretch for any of them from an acting standpoint by any means, especially Kevin Hart. I mean, he's Kevin Hart. He's just
literally playing Kevin Hart. He's the short guy 100%. Who yells a lot in every 100%. Goddamn movie he's ever been in.
But damn it, if they're not all charismatic in what they're doing. So I think that the 4 of them were fantastic. I will say that Nick Jonas is in this movie, and he is very much one note. and I think that he's overshadowed by the larger personalities amongst the other 4 actors. And I also had a note in here to bring up Bobby Cannavale or Caravan. Whatever.
Caravan.
I think that he definitely phoned it in here. But, I mean, at the end of the day, look what was written for him. There wasn't a whole lot he could do with it. But I've seen him put a lot more effort into a lot of other things. So I think that this is kind of what we were talking about with Domhnall Gleeson earlier. But I think we were talking about it before we started recording, with him being in that Peter Rabbit movie. Like, this guy's just got to make a house payment. So that's why he's in Jumanji, I think.
For sure. This movie hinged on great chemistry between the stars, and it was the highlight of the film for me. All 4 of them were just really, really great. Kevin Hart, I mean, he was just playing Kevin Hart, but I mean, he did it well. I mean, he plays himself really well. But I think the star of the film is Jack Black. He was the actor asked to do the most. And you kind of touched on it earlier. He absolutely nails it. It's his best performance I've seen him do in years, especially comedic performance. And honestly, I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has really grown as an actor. I mean, it's certainly far from an Oscar-worthy performance by any means, but he's really good, and he's gotten better through the years. I definitely think he's grown. The kid actors weren't asked to do much. I didn't really think that they did a whole lot. I mean, they weren't in this movie very much. It was mostly the 4 that you brought up. I did like the casting of Colin Hanks at the end of the film. I thought that he brought a maturity, and I feel like you need a veteran actor's presence at that moment. That is a pretty heavy moment in the film, one of the heavier emotional moments that you have in the film. And so I kind of liked him being the guy at the end. And I know this is kind of a weird mention because they don't actually share a scene, but I do really like Orange County, that movie. I think it came out in the early 2000s. But Colin Hanks and Jack Black were in that movie as well. Even though they don't share the screen in this particular movie, I thought that was pretty cool.
I think the guy who directed this directed Orange County.
I don't think so. I thought Mike White, maybe he just wrote that.
I don't know.
I think he just wrote Orange County. I thought he directed it too. Maybe I'm wrong.
You want to put a bet on it?
Are you looking at it right now? That's why you're trying to get me to bet on it?
Yeah, he directed it.
Oh, okay, cool. That's even better, because I do enjoy that movie, and I do like that he cast Colin Hanks in this movie.
Perfect. You want to talk about the action?
For sure. There's not a ton of it in here, but I like most of the movie. I thought it was really, really fun. I think that they were able to play with the video game genre to kind of mix up the action. There's a lot of different video game tropes that they use to kind of lighten up the action a little bit, so I definitely appreciated that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's not a lot here. It was fun, for sure. I definitely thought that the action was shot pretty well, but for me, it didn't capture the peril that was present in the first film. I did appreciate that a lot of the action, well, maybe not a lot, but I appreciate that some of the action was done practically, but there were a couple points with the CGI where I thought that it looked a little cheap.
Yeah, maybe that's a homage to the original movie. Man, those monkeys are so bad in the first movie.
Oh my God,
I can't even get over it, how bad they are.
They're the worst part of that movie, is the CGI monkeys.
And honestly, like, there's certain scenes, and I know we're getting off topic a little bit, there's certain scenes where they could have just used actual monkeys. I don't understand why they didn't. And then obviously there's some moments where you're not going to teach a monkey how to drive a car, or shoot a gun, or use a stove. But come on. You could have used real monkeys at certain points of that movie. Anyways.
In 1995, that had to have cost $700 million to CGI that monkey.
Yeah, I don't get how bad it is. Like, I mean, I get that it was in 95, but I mean, Jurassic Park came around the same time, and that doesn't look awful. That still looks really good today. But I mean, good God. So the spiders look literally like string puppets that they're just moving up and down. Like, they're awful. But, yeah, I thought the action was done pretty well in this movie. All right, so star rating, would you give Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle out of 5 stars?
3.5.
Wow, I thought I was going to be high with 3.5. I thought you were going to go a little bit lower than that. I will say that, I mean, we still have a few weeks and I haven't looked at my list, but this might actually sneak into my top 10.
It won't be in my top 10, and I doubt that it ends up being on your top 10 whenever you actually sit down and reflect, but I was definitely surprised, and it was definitely, if I had to do like top 5 movies that movie-going experiences this year, like it would definitely be in there. Like it was really fun to sit through and really fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think that it's always important when we do that episode to mention that it's our favorite movies. Like I really just was pleasantly blown away by how much I liked this movie. Like it was really, really fun. I just really enjoyed it.
I really am finding myself liking The Rock a lot more than I want to as an actor. God damn it, if he's not charismatic and if he doesn't keep just knocking it out of the park. It's not even fair, man.
If you're being honest, I mean, he does like 7-8 movies a year. He's gonna eventually get one that you like. Like, yeah. Oh yeah, man, I really like that movie. I really like that movie. He was also in 20 other movies in the last 2 years.
I will say that I don't know if you saw the trailer for Rampage, but that looks pretty fucking awful.
Oh yeah, it looks just god awful.
So take that, The Rock.
Yeah, I think he'll take that. I think he'll be all right with that.
It'll still make $1 billion.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right, so we're going to end this episode as we do with all of our episodes with a nerd favorite. I'm going to change it up a little bit. It's going to be a little bit different kind of question, but we obviously just got done talking about Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, which is a sequel to a movie, Jumanji, that I never thought I would ever see a sequel to. So I thought that it would be kind of cool to ask what your, I guess, favorite film that you'd like to see a sequel of to kind of make it more of a nerd favorite. So never thought that Jumanji was ever going to get a sequel. That's what inspired this question. And my answer actually is going to be a film that I know it will literally never get a sequel because it's actually getting rebooted. And I think I might have mentioned this before on the podcast. I don't know. Maybe we've done this question before. I don't know. But Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with the original cast and David Fincher doing that film. I love the book, The Girl That Played with Fire, and I just really want to see Fincher and that cast with that tone do that movie. Like, I think I would really, really love that movie quite a lot because that story is just phenomenal. That's
a good one, and I remember liking The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo more than you did when it came out. That was pre-podcast days, but I would love to see a sequel to that movie with that original cast. But for me, my answer is it's a movie that doesn't need a sequel, but I think that there's enough material that they could do a sequel with it, and that's Inception. I think that movie's fantastic, and I think that it's just so original and the idea is so cool that you could absolutely set another film in that universe and kind of play with the idea of going into somebody's dreams and going into different layers of dreams. So obviously, I don't think Christopher Nolan's ever going to come back to that franchise or that movie and do another one, but I think that there's room there to explore it a little bit. For sure. I don't see a guy like him ever doing something like that. It seems like he's kind of the one and done kind of guy, or he makes that original movie. I mean, obviously he did the Batman movies and those were sequels, but I mean, just with his original content, it seems like he wants to tell a really cool original story and then he's going to move on to the next one. For sure, man. All right, so that is it for episode 168 of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast. Of course, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. Check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerds You're Looking For. Check out our Twitch channel. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. Email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. And, of course, vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn. Tyler Hunt.
We are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.